Hey, this is Michael J from Michael J Online. So glad you could join me. I owned a yoga studio for 13 years. I hired a ton of teachers during that time and also let a few go. So I know a little bit about what it takes to be a great employee or contractor for a yoga studio and how to build your classes. So I've got 5 tips for you right now. Some of them are along the lines of etiquette and just good business behavior, and I'll have more later. So let's get to the first one. First tip: show up early. The most important part of building relationships with your students is to have that precious time before class and after class. So I say that time is of equal importance to what is happening on the yoga mat. This is how you build relationships. This is how you get to know your customers. It's how you make yourself look prepared that you've taken the time for their class. So you want to show up early, you want to get the heat right, you want to be logged into the computer if you're working on the front desk before a class, you want to be prepared with your mat out, with the props that you need for classes, and even if you've got a class plan, have it on your mat. But show up early. These people have taken their time out of their day to come to your class. And if you just, really put that time in, they'll come back to the classes. So that's the first one. Second tip is welcome your students. Building classes is about relationships. This person has taken their time out of their day to come to your class. People want to feel acknowledged, they want to feel recognized. So no stretching on your yoga mat before class. Always be up front or at the door or at the sign-in area, and looking them in the eyes when they walk through the door, actually acknowledging this beautiful human being is in front of you. They're not just a number in your class. Take the time to learn their names. There's tips for learning their names. If it's a manual sign-in, just look at the manual sign-in. If it's a scan sign-in system like MindBody Online, learn their names after they've swiped in, and use their names as often as you can. So then when you're teaching, you can be like, Yvonne, stop talking. My student Yvonne will know who I'm talking about, what I'm talking about there, and many of my other students. So it's about that building relationships. So welcoming them, acknowledging that they're actually there. And for many people, the first time walking through the studio is the most difficult part of starting yoga. After seeing, images of yoga journal covers, a lot of people think that you have to look a certain way, and it's so not true. So just, once they've come through the door, you take over, make them feel welcome, make them feel comfortable, show them where their coats go, show them where shoes go, show them where the washroom is. Be there, welcome them, build the relationship. Tip number 3: being authentic in your teaching. Now, this is really hard when you're first starting out as a teacher. We all did it. I did it. I emulated my teachers. I used my teachers' words. I still do sometimes. Those words still resonate with me, so I still may use those words or those sayings or those visualizations. But you have to become yourself for people to feel that they want to join in on the journey with you. So, in my classes, I have joy, I have relationships, I have joy, I have banter with my students, I have fun in my classes, and it doesn't make it feel like work. It makes me want to jump in the car and run to class to have these relationships with my students and watching their progressions, and that has really come from over time fully being me now when I teach. I'm an alignment-based teacher, but after 15 years of teaching, alignment's the least interesting thing to me. What interests me now is how people feel after they leave. Do they feel better when they came in? Do I bring them a little bit of lightness and joy? And that's who I hope to be. So I hope I pass that on to my students, and that's how I've built my classes. So just authentically being you, that takes time, but just do work on it. If you have anything going on in your life, say you suffer from anxieties in your personal life, use that. That's a way of connecting to your students. It's like you being authentically you. It's like, I have this in my life, I struggle with it, but this is how I cope with it. And you may then bring in your pranayama, breathing exercises, or whatever you can bring to it. Whatever, if you have tight hamstrings, use that. I have tight hamstrings. I relate to a lot of my students by that. I have tight hips. I relate to a lot of my students with that. Just being real and who I am. Number 4, lefts and rights, mirror teaching. So for a new teacher and an experienced teacher, this can be a daunting thing. And a lot of yoga teacher trainings these days are not even teaching to do mirror teaching. To me, it's not about what's easiest for you to teach as a teacher. It's about what's easier for your students to follow. So that's what it should be about. So when you take the time to retrain your brain to mirror teach, it's going to be way easier for your students to follow. And if you've taken a class with someone that mirror teaches, you know that. So just really taking the time that when you want their right foot to go back into lunge, you put your left foot back into lunge if you're facing them. Easy tips for this. So I've mentored many teachers at my studio, and especially ones coming straight out of teacher training. And simple tips are either on your mat, L and an R on your mat, so that you've got that visual cue to remind you. Or in our studio, by the door, quite often you'll see an L and an R on each side of the entry door, which is at the very back of the studio as the students come in. So when you're teaching, you can use that L and R, because it really is a retraining when you've learnt your entire life from a little child that this is your right and this is your left, and then all of a sudden you have to retrain your brain to do that. It can be a little intimidating, but I encourage you to do that because it's about your students, not about you. And if you mess up in that, it doesn't matter. Make fun of yourself. I do it all the time. So if I'm tired, if I've been teaching a lot and I'm physically tired, or I haven't slept well, any of those things, my students know my lefts and rights are all over the bloody place. Like they just, I just have to laugh at it. I have to be authentic. I have to say, oh, it's going to be one of those nights tonight. Stick with me. Or if I've forgotten, I've done something on one side and forgotten to do it on the other side, I'll joke about that and say, and somebody else will be doing it right in my class. I'm like, oh, thanks for keeping me honest. And so you just have to bring lightness into that. Again, being yourself. 5th, and this is a pet peeve of mine when I was a studio owner and now as an instructor too. Educate your students to put back the props tidily. If you're working for a yoga studio, the owner of the studio will really, really appreciate that. Nobody wants to walk into a studio where the props look like they've exploded. So educate your students at the end of class. Can you please help you just announce, can you please help put the props back tidily? And then what I do is just go over there. I help people put them in the right place. And then they just learn that that's part of the mindfulness practice. And so that way, anytime anybody walks into the studio, they all look clean, zen, ready to go. And it looks like the studio and the instructor care about the place. So it's a small thing, but it's a big thing. So I used to have a contract that my instructors would sign, and one of the things was to put the props back tidily. And so if they didn't, all I used to do as an owner was take a photograph of the props, text it to them, and they got the message. And it didn't happen for a while. So anyway, I'm going to have lots more tips soon. So please follow me on Facebook or Instagram, Michael J C A, Michael Jayca. And I'm going to be having more tips for yoga instructors and some tips for yoga studio owners soon. So follow me, and let's keep in touch. Cheers.